Yeah, I think we've sort of let the cat out of the bag about the next question, which is the impact of these decisions on reporting. So, certainly we see the impact of these go-to-market changes on systems, and in our business we see an organization stepping toward ABM or increasing the channel mix and maybe entering new territories with through a channel program. And suddenly we have all these impacts on systems. I love the shift in discussion toward the reporting, and that, the changing definition of a customer. We see clients that suddenly will start introducing a trial, and is the trial a customer? Or, yes, if they're paying, but how do we think about that? What about when a new round of investment occurs and there's a new lead investor? Is that also a change that impacts reporting, or is that something that you've seen?
Honestly, no. When I have a new investor, it's more, here's your reports. Let's give him the education enablement needed to understand, but I haven't really seen any changes needed in the consistency of what we produce.
Oh, that's great.
Mhm.
So no new expectations.
I would just chime in super quickly that carrying on the previous conversation, you have to present, the CFO and the CEO need to present to the board what the definitions of the metrics are and any change. And so that you're not having a lot of discussions about the interpretation of reporting in board meetings, because that's inefficient. But when you have a new investor and a new board member, you have to remember they don't know that setup. So it is really on the CEO and the CFO to now present to the new investor, okay, here's how we define our metrics, and here's how we report on our metrics. And that has to be set up so that, when Heidi's producing these reports, there's not a lot of pushback of, oh, suddenly we want something different, or there's been a lot of discussion, or they didn't like the way that looked, or whatever. That's great that you haven't run into that so much, but I've seen that in other companies where you think everyone knows what their, what the assumptions are, but they don't.
I will say, I actually think it's great to have the new set of eyes on those reports, because they might ask questions. Everything I produce, I try to show the history as well. So it's not just this quarter, that's this quarter compared to prior quarters, so that they're coming in and they can at least understand the historical and baselines that have come previously. But they might ask questions about the prior quarters where others didn't when it came up at that time. And I think just having the fresh set of eyes is always super valuable for anyone in the company to hear and have asked.
Yeah, very cool. So let's talk about very specific changes. Lauren, maybe we could start with you. How does adding a new product line impact year-over-year reporting?
It's a great question. And I think when a company organically is adding a new product line, you get so caught up in figuring out the specs, getting customer input into the specs for the problem you're trying to solve with this new product line, business plans, marketing, promoting it. It's kind of like the pricing question of, we figured out new pricing, we're marketing it, like who thought about setting up the SKUs for it? Same thing with a new product line. You can forget. And it's really helpful to have finance coming along with you all along the way, because inevitably there's differences. Maybe this new product line needs different metrics to track it. Maybe it has implications on the definitions that you assume, and this new product line doesn't totally fit into that. So does it require its own definitions, or can you merge them together? That's where it's so much better for RevOps and for finance to be involved in those discussions up front, because they can think those through while you're thinking about the marketing of the new product, the customer acquisition, all those business things. And it's really helpful to have it, set up in advance.
Agreed. Operations should never be an afterthought. When you're launching new product lines, will actually help reduce the friction in the launch by bringing us in earlier. And it is important to think about all the impacts of a new product line. So anything from that cost to acquire, new messaging for the ADRs. We have to delineate the new product lines in all our reporting because it is in addition to our historical baseline. So we don't want to convolute those metrics either. And then people often forget about customer success. So how do we give our existing customers this new product line? Do they get it at a discounted rate? You know, do they even know about it? Do they need it? So there's so much to think about that operations needs to be involved much earlier in the process than typically happens.
Yeah, and you just reminded me of one thing that I've seen also is that companies and the reporting within companies can have a hard time recognizing the fact that the dynamics of and the metrics for a new product are different than for existing business. So the cost of customer acquisition for a new product may be much higher. The unit economics may be much higher. And so if you just kind of throw it in there and then suddenly the board's looking at this and like, well, this was a bad decision to invest all of this in this new product because it's so expensive and it has to be set up properly, which finance and ops can make sure that that's set up. I've seen product managers who are just pulling their hair out feeling like this is such a great product and it's not being supported, it's not being recognized for all the great stuff that we're getting, but some of it's just the reporting and the presentation of it and not a fundamental flaw.
I was on a call the other day and we don't get these quite as often these days, where a company was asking about transitioning from on-prem to SaaS for the first time, introducing their first SaaS product. And I was like, whoa, you know, we sort of forget that we had this tumultuous decade plus, maybe closer to 15 years of companies sort of navigating that with their revenue reporting, sort of the impacts of that switch.